U.S. Postal Service has raised rates. I think it's almost 8 times in the last 4 years. It's about twice a year on the dot. In general, landowners are an older subset of the population. So they may not trust technology like SMS as much. Mail definitely gets you your hottest leads. The problem is they're fewer and far between.
Hey there, everyone, and welcome to another episode of the Jack Bosch Show, where we talk about all things real estate, land, entrepreneurship, and anything in between. And today I have a great guest, a friend of mine, fellow land investor, and also the owner and operator of the land cold calling service called LandCaller.com. So, Joe Roberts. Joe, how are you doing today?
Hey, Jack. Great to see you. I am doing great. It's great to be here with you. I've listened to your show for a long time, so it's cool to be on it.
Wonderful. Great. I'm excited. Okay, so talk to us. What does LandCaller do? Let's just jump right into. I like going straight into the content.
Yeah. Well, I'm a former U.S. Marine, and if you know anything about Marines, we're not the smartest bunch. So I try to keep things very simple. So when I was coming up for a name of my company, I was like, what does this company do? It cold calls people for land caller. So it's right there in the name. I started in land flipping a number of years ago. I went, the route that is primarily taught by LPG and others of primarily doing direct mail or only doing direct mail. And then at some point, I wanted to expand into some other areas as I was getting ready to leave the Marine Corps and take on land flipping as a full-time job. And I decided that cold calling would be a good fit. Couldn't find a cold calling company, so I built one.
Very cool. And let's talk about that cold calling versus direct mail, pros and cons. What is your stand on it?
Yeah, look, I tell people all the time, like every single type of lead gen method works, right? I think that mail is still honestly it's still the gorilla in the room, right? I would say probably, at least in my experience, I don't know about you, Jack, but I would say at least 75% of land flippers use direct mail, either primarily or at least in conjunction with something else. For me, what kind of spurred me to make the switch was I was just seeing a lot of saturation. What had used to be a pretty easy way to get deals, I was getting deals at a lower rate, and the people I was talking to were telling me about how they got a different letter every day of the week or multiple letters a day. And then mail costs were going up. I think the mail service, U.S. Postal Service, has raised rates. I think it's almost 8 times in the last 4 years. It's about twice a year on the dot that they do it. So I was just looking for something to kind of expand my reach. Cold calling seemed to be a good fit for land owners. And I think, my time with land callers kind of proved that out. In general, landowners are an older subset of the population. So they may not trust technology like SMS as much. They're used to talking on the phone because, they grew up at a time when phone was the primary method of communication, not social media or other things. Many of them.
You're talking about the sellers, right?
Yes, sir. Yeah, exactly. The people we're trying to reach. Owners of vacant land in general in the U.S. tend to be baby boomer generation, some Gen X in there as well, but the primary generation that owns land is still baby boomers. And I thought that cold calling would be a good method to get after that generation. Many of them still have landlines, right? So you're not going to do any good texting a landline. Which is also, I think, a reason why mail still works so well, because we still are dealing with a generation primarily that is used to the days of sending mail. So in terms of the pros and cons, mail definitely gets you your hottest leads. Like there's nothing like a blind offer direct mail lead. Somebody who's gotten your letter, sat down, had time to think about, do I really want to sell for this price? And then, wrote or called you back and was like, yeah, let's do it. Right. That will always be the highest quality lead. The problem is they're fewer and far between. And so good land flippers find ways to grab more of the market share. And I think that cold calling will reach those people that either don't open up their mail, that that they sense is junk mail, that just goes straight to the trash, or they just never respond to those things, or just people that are more relational in nature. We get a lot of people that just like to tell the story of their land, and when you make that human voice-to-voice connection right off the bat, you can really develop rapport with them and start to build a relationship that can lead to a win-win for both sides.
Yeah, I agree. So, I mean, at the end of the day, that the days of in land flipping are over, where you can go. I remember the days where you would send out the letter and you get a 10% response rate, right? So, because nobody in the country was doing it, and guess what? Partly I'm at fault for that not being the case anymore, because
Yes, you are.
we too successfully taught thousands of people around the country to do this. But here's the thing: like, I want to like plant the flag, plant. I still love my direct mail because I'm still getting 5 to 10 times the response rates of my household selling friends. Like, I belong to a mastermind of some of the top real estate investors, and 80% of them are house wholesalers or house fix and flippers. And their direct mail strategies is getting them a 0.3% response rate. Now, I don't know many mailers that I've ever done that gotten that low of a response rate. Usually, if it's in the 1% response rate, a good one is in the 1.5 to 2% response rate, and a great one is in a 3% response rate. And there's still some areas where you can get a 6 or 8% response rate, but usually that's cluttered with $1,000 pieces of land that nobody wants anyway, and that's why you get such a great response rate. So I'm going to exclude that because I don't want to deal with those. But a good area still gets a 1 to 3% response rate. And I find that to be a really good overall response rate. So now but again, I know that more than 1 to 3% of the people are willing to sell their properties. So the real answer here is like what you actually said. So like the thing is like, let's not be satisfied with 1 to 3%. Let's instead also get all the people that haven't responded to the letter because they're getting overwhelmed by spam or something, not even from other people, but just like there's junk coming in left and right. Mm-hmm. We as human beings living in the Western society are being so clobbered with information that there's like 20 concerts a day in Phoenix, and I don't even hear about any of them because I'm so overwhelmed. There's this constant tidal wave of information coming that it's harder to respond to something. So the cold call is a much directer response because you either pick up or eventually you're going to check that voicemail that's being left for you. So it makes perfect sense because you got a much higher reach rate if you have the right phone number, right?
100%. And I think, something that always struck me was like, as land flippers, if you're doing this right, you're being careful about your county selection, right? I know this is something that your coaches, Jack, hammer with people is how to find the right market, right? So if you took all this time to find the right market, wouldn't you want to find every deal possible in that market? And like you said, that's not all going to come from mail. I look at it as like a Venn diagram, right? There's people that will only respond to mail. There's people that will only respond to cold calling. There's people that will only respond to PPC. And there's a big chunk of people that will respond to maybe a combination of all of them. But it's a reason I would say definitely more than half of LandCaller clients also mail, because they work really great hand in hand. For instance, when we run a campaign, it's much cheaper to call somebody, right, than to mail. Mail is getting more and more expensive, like we discussed. So what a lot of our clients do is we call a campaign, we run through this list time after time, reaching out. By the time we get to the end of that campaign, if somebody hasn't picked up the phone, they're not picking up the phone anytime soon because we've probably tried them dozens of times across different phone numbers, different times of day, different area codes, different days of the week. Right. So now you have this portion of people from this big list you had. Now it's maybe down to a few thousand of people we couldn't contact. So now you can go mail that much smaller list and be much more targeted with your mail because you've already reached all these other people. And now these are the only people left that you need to reach in that target area. So that's what a good amount of our clients do. They call it, then they mail it, and they really hammer home, like, this is the market I want. I want to get every possible seller in this market.
Wonderful. And that I think that is the way to go in today's world. You can't just, again, the real proper way of doing this is to have a multitude of different marketing channels. 10 years ago, it was 100% direct mail. Today is 30% cold calling, 30% direct mail, perhaps some texting involved, perhaps also, I mean, some pay-per-click, right? We're currently expanding our relationship with a pay-per-click company for them to do some pay-per-click advertising for us, and to get some more organic leads, because these are also great leads, because if you do pay-per-click, not Facebook advertising, pay-per-click advertising, the traditional Google pay-per-click advertising, where the advertising only shows up if somebody actively goes and says, I'm looking for, how do I sell my land in Oklahoma? Then boom, if you're interested in buying Oklahoma, your ad shows up and says like, hey, here, submit your information, we buy in Oklahoma. And they're going to click on it and they'll submit it. That's a great lead strategy. So today, living in a world where you really got to use all of those together. Now, you guys do a really cool service. Can you describe me how this typically worked? What do you, how do you typically go about them? Go about getting a hold of these buyers, of these sellers? Describe the process or your service a little bit more in detail.
Yeah, sure. So, I built LandCaller different than kind of everything else that was out there in the traditional model of cold calling, because cold calling's been around forever. We were the first company that was built for land, but there was real estate cold calling companies that are out there that would also call for land. They just didn't quite understand the space, which is why I didn't have good experience with them. But the typical way that those services are given is like, you pay for a package of dials, right? Like I'll pay you to call 2,500 times my list of 1,000 people. And what I found is that that's not really an effective way to get a hold of people, because you as the client, you don't actually care how many times I called. You cared whether or not you get a lead or the person's not interested in selling. Like ultimately, that's the metric that you care about. How many of these are leads? How many people are not interested in selling? And so what I realized is that rather than just call a number, because you could call, Joe Bob, and Joe Bob owns the piece of land you want, but he's working a 9 to 5, 5 days a week. And so you call him 5 times, he never picks up. He's at his job. It's not till Saturday that he finally picks up and you get a hold of him, you could talk to him. But if you just, ran and say, I'm going to call him twice. If he doesn't pick up, oh, well, you miss out on that deal. So the way we kind of structured our company is we have a full-time cold caller dedicated to each campaign that's with us. And so that allows us to do a lot of things. It allows us to run a campaign, not just make phone calls. And so, a client will come to us and either maybe they've already pulled a record list, right? They've already got their target area and they've pulled the records. Maybe they mailed it. Now they want to call it a few months later. Or they might just come to us and say, hey, I want to target these types of properties in these states, and we'll actually pull the data for them. We can do either. Then we skip trace the data using credit bureau skip tracing. So this is the same data. So skip tracing is, finding their phone numbers. And this is the same data that the big credit bureaus, Equifax, TransUnion use. So it's very high quality. And then basically it's as simple as we get a script worked up that asks the questions that they want answered on that cold call, and we start dialing. And we will go out and purchase thousands of numbers, because we're going to match area codes, and we'll register those numbers with the carriers so that it doesn't show up as spam, right, when it's calling. And then we dial 8 hours a day, 5 days a week, Tuesday through Saturday are our call days.
So tell me, what do you do with those phone numbers? Let's get into that a little bit. How do you make sure they don't show up as spam?
Yeah, so you have to register your phone. So when we actually purchase numbers, right? So just like you sign up with Verizon, you get your number. We do that just at a mass scale, right? So we have all these phone numbers. Now, these phone numbers were used by other people before, and then somebody could have marked them as spam. So you have to take those phone numbers and you have to register them with each of the carriers, T-Mobile, AT&T, Verizon, and basically say, hey, we're a legitimate company. We're doing everything with regulatory compliance. We own these numbers. Please whitelist them. And then that basically makes it so that when they call you, you don't see suspected spam. Now, after I've dialed for a couple of weeks, maybe 3, 4, 5, some people got some calls from us, thought it was spam, and they reported that as spam, which means you have to go back then and re-register those numbers. So that's like in our weekly battle rhythm for our team. We're constantly re-registering numbers. It's something our competitors don't do. I don't know why, because I mean, it is fairly time consuming and it can cost some money, but the pickup rate is so much higher when your number doesn't come up as suspected spam on their handset.
Yeah.
So
I get those all day long. I was like, I get suspect I've had my same cell phone number for now 24 years.
So everybody in the world has your number. Yeah, all the big companies.
And I've used it in too many places to register and things like that, particularly since we don't have a landline anymore. So it's gotten everywhere, and I get what feels like 25 phone calls a day, and I don't pick up any of them. If it's not my wife, my daughter, or my parents, or my brother, or one of our team members, because then I know something urgent is happening on the team side of things, I don't pick up. So, but I mean, that's been, but it's constantly suspected. The easy ones to not pick up are the suspected spam ones. You just basically click them away. The harder ones are when they call with like a Hawaii number. It's like, ooh, who wants something from me from Hawaii? Right? But
that is a method. We have lots of tricks that we use. I say tricks, strategies, right? To get, because ultimately the goal is to get that pickup. The dials, and that's another reason I don't count dials, because you don't care about dials. You care about how many people we're talking to. But so calling from, we'll do that frequently, especially as we get towards the end of a campaign and we're trying to eke out as many of the last leads as we can, right? Really get a hold of these people that have been tough to get to pick up the phone. You pick like a kind of an obscure location to call from, something that they're not expecting. That'll get your pickups. You could do double dials or triple dials, right? So you maybe have picked up for that before, where like somebody calls you and then they immediately call you again. Maybe they immediately call you again. You're like, okay, who's trying to get a hold of me that like desperately wants to, right? So you pick up on that second or third time, and it happens in quick succession. You can match area codes, not just by, so let's say, Jack, you've got an Arizona area code, so we've matched your area code. Okay, that didn't work. You didn't pick up. Well, you own the property in Tennessee, so let's go call from a Tennessee number. Okay, he didn't pick up that after a number of tries. But let's say, Jack, you actually live in California. You've got an Arizona number, your property's in Tennessee, your mailing address is in California. Okay, so let's go use some California numbers. So that's why we have tens of thousands of numbers. So that allows us to kind of strategize on how we're going to get these people to pick up the phone and talk to us.
Wow, that's crazy. Now, what made you come up with that service other than you saw there's none available? What made you decide to not only create it for yourself? You answered that, I think, already, but what made you then make it available to others when you're essentially doing what I'm doing? You're creating your own competition.
I am. And I thought about that for a little bit at first because it was working really great. But man, it's like you say, I think you said this at the conference where I was at in September. It's like, it's a great big blue ocean out there, right? Like people are like, well, why? You know, we have literally hundreds of clients. We have thousands of leads coming in every week. They're like, why don't you just take all those leads? I'm like, what do you think? How do you think I'm going to process thousands of leads? Right. I have a full-time land flipping company. Like, don't be wrong. I have a campaign that's been running nonstop with LandCaller since I launched the company. And my land flipping company, separate business, is a client of LandCaller's. And it's doing great. But I mean, I have a few employees. We have, 6 markets that we target. We go, 6 months of the year, and then we go back through another 6 months. We hit each of those areas twice in a year. I'm happy. I'm great. Like, my business is booming, and I'm not even scratching the surface of everything that's out there. So, I think it's the same thing with LPG offering coaching services while you guys also flip land. It's the same thing with, land flippers that are building CRMs for people, land flippers that are building texting services for people. I think it's actually great because when you have somebody who's in the industry, whether it's whether they're presenting coaching or cold calling or mailing, when they're in the industry and they know the ins and outs, like the product you get on the other side is far better. Like somebody's going to get so much more value out of an LPG coach than they are just, general real estate entrepreneur coaching. It's the same thing for cold calling. Somebody's going to get a lot more value out of us who's actually down in the trenches out of just, hire a cold caller. But, when I started it, I approached my partner. He also had a land flipping company. And, we were like, let's just build this thing and just take on a couple other people, see if it works for them. If it works for us, I'm sure it'll work for somebody else. At a minimum, we can get it so that it covers our costs, right? Like we can get our cold caller for free if we can get a couple people signed up paying for this service. And then it just kind of grew naturally from there. Naturally, a little like slowly at first, and then just kind of exploded once word got out. So
very cool. Yeah, no, and I kind of like planted that question in there because I was hoping you would say what you said, which is basically people out there often come to any kind of real estate with a scarcity, zero-sum game kind of mindset. And technically, is real estate a zero-sum game? Yes, and it is, because if you have the deal, then I can't have the deal. That's true. Right? That is true. That's the definition of a zero-sum game. Like we can't have both the deal and then no, if there's only one deal, then either you get it or I get it, and one of the two of us, if we're fighting for the deal, one of us will lose out. But there's not just one deal. There's a million deals. There's 46 million pieces of land, and typically about 5% of them or more, I don't know, I would be interested in hearing your estimation, but my estimation is about 5% of them at any given time are willing to let their properties go at a significant enough discount for us to be able to make money. So that means at any given time, there's 2.3 million pieces of land that we just need to go find. And some of them are garbage land, yes, I understand. Some of them are $1,000 lots, yes, I understand. But even if you take half of them as that, it's still $1.15 million or 1.515 million pieces of land that at any given time are available to be purchased. And if you think about, after they're gone, they're all gone. No, because you know what? Next year, somebody else becomes an heir. Somebody else has a spouse that, I don't know, get divorced from, or they have a situation where the grandchildren are born and they no longer want to move away to that place where they wanted to build that retirement place. Somebody else has a health scare and rather wants to be close to his doctors and get rid of some of the stuff they no longer need. Somebody else, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So this is a constantly replenishing to the degree that we have. That's a funny kind of thing. And I don't know if you have done this already, but we have many times, not many, but multiple times, have we bought properties from people for pennies on the dollar who we have sold those properties 10 years prior at full market value?
I have not been doing this long enough to have run into. I've only been doing it 4 years, but I look forward to the day where I can say that. I'm sure if anybody, you would be the one out there that's done that.
At one of our last live events, we had a student show up that says like, hey, we just bought a property dirt cheap from somebody who bought it from you guys. So we bought it cheap, sold it expensive. They kept it for 10 or 15 years, and then they sold it to one of our students, again cheap, who is now reselling it and making a $17,000 profit on it. So basically, even the people that buy from us and buy from you 10, 15 years down the road, their life plans have changed. Their life plans will change. They're coming to situations like, well, it was a great idea back in the days to buy this, but the value's never developed up. We used it only a few times. We used it much less than we wanted to. I'm sick and tired of paying property taxes. Let me just get rid of it. And they go and they sell it, in our case, to our students, or even back to us, because our direct mail hits, our cold calling hits, and now they're like, I'm interested in selling that to you, and you realize that you already have that property in your database as having sold it to them 10 or 15 or 20 years ago. So it's a constantly replenishing amount of deals that are in there. So there's at any given time, there's 1.5 million good properties that are available for you to purchase at or put on a contract for pennies on the dollar. So that's why we're not worried about competition. Yes, the response rates are lower, but they're not It's just marketing also always changes. Go ahead.
I was just saying the other thing is that like this industry, even as crowded as it's gotten in the last few years, is nothing like the rest of the real estate world. I mean, I'm actually interested to hear your thoughts, Jack, on this number. People ask me, I think that now, if you're talking about people that flip land, right? Like they say, like maybe they've done a property or two, they've they take a course, they watch a YouTube video, they try it out, they get lucky, whatever. Maybe there's like 5,000-6,000 of them. But if you're talking about pros that are trying to build something, that are trying to, make this a business and not just a side hustle. It might start as a side hustle, but they have a vision to, get that freedom from their W-2. I put that number at less than 1,000 or close to it, of truly pros out there. So now you've got that number of 1+ million properties, and you're really just going up against 1,000 other people out there with businesses like ours. Those are great odds.
Yeah, I agree. 100%. That's exactly the kind of numbers that I run. I even sometimes say, like, what if it's 1,500 people? There's 3,000 counties. And if you take a third of the counties as being like too rural or too in the middle of nowhere or whatever it is, that still takes it to 2,000 counties, and there's 1,000 to 1,500 people out there doing this on a significant scale. There's probably more people than that in Phoenix, Arizona, in the greater Phoenix area flipping houses. There's probably more than that in the Raleigh, North Carolina area flipping houses. There's probably more than that in the southern in Miami. There's more than that in New York, in those areas, doing house fix and flip and wholesale and all this kind of stuff. So one market in US has more people than we have land flippers in the entire United States. And that really should give you some cause for confidence to see the glass half full, but also some urgency, because guess what? There's more people coming to the market. So the time to make money is now. The time to get into the space is now, when it is still a ground floor opportunity. Right. So with that said, let's talk about LandCaller a little bit. So you have your own land business. What kind of properties do you focus on?
Yeah, that's kind of changed as I've gotten more experienced over the years. I started very much with smaller stuff, purchasing in that 15 to 20K, 10 to 20K range. But I think both the shift in my experience levels and comfort with the business, and obviously access to more capital that comes with that as you build a business. And then also my shift to being more land cold calling focused as opposed to mail has led me to kind of higher price point properties, because I think that higher price point properties, larger acreage stuff is actually a better fit for cold calling than it is for mail in many situations. Just somebody owns a property that's worth 30,000, 50,000. Selling for 30, 40 cents on the dollar isn't too crazy, right? And the market might be enough where like they're not really sure of what it's worth. When you start talking about somebody who owns a property that's multiple six figures, a lot of those people are a little bit more sophisticated sellers. They have a little bit better idea of what their property's worth. And a lot of them are not going to let it go for 30, 40, 50 cents on the dollar. That's fine though. There's still 6 figures of profit to be made, even if I buy it at 60 or 65, 70% of cents on the dollar, especially if I'm adding value via subdivides, right? Or some other value add opportunity. I get the utility to run electricity up there, whatever it may be, right? So my focus has kind of shifted over the last year and a half or so. I'm solely in North Carolina. I've never worked anywhere else. So just in this state. Various places throughout the state. It's a very diverse terrain here. We've got the mountains all the way to the coast, so lots of different. And I'm actually I'm pretty rural too. Like I work in some of the most rural counties in North Carolina. Some of the less rural stuff too. But I actually don't do anything near the big metros, Charlotte, Raleigh. I like that middle ground of being in attractive areas, but not trying to fight with huge developers over large tracts of land near Raleighs and Charlottes and places like that. So, I call it semi-rural, rural, semi-rural. I focus on larger acreage that I can find a way to add value to, and I focus on properties that are worth six figures. Because if somebody owns a property that's worth 400, he's not going to let it go for 200 usually. But if he lets it go to me for 275 and I cut it in half, I mean, there's 125, 150,000 in profit to be made right there, and I bought it for 70 cents on the dollar. So that's another reason I am not concerned with the business getting more saturated, is that good operators who find ways to build businesses that add value will always be in demand, no matter what the industry is, real estate, anything else. If you're a good operator and you find ways to add value, you're going to have a business. So that's kind of where I focus my niche, though.
Yeah, as I mentioned earlier, I'm part of a mastermind with a bunch of the top house real estate investors. I'm the oddball out with a land guide. I think there's only three land people in there, and one of them, or four, and two of them actually are former coaching students of ours. So it's like kind of cool to see like the next generation join the mastery level there. But the point is, everyone else is house flipper, and I'm looking around and it's like there is this super saturated, shark infested, red blood water in the water, red ocean that is like, it's red because it's so full of blood from all those sharks. Yet these guys doing 25 houses a month in one market. They're doing 300 houses a year. They're rehabbing something like 200 properties a year. They're finding development opportunities. They're doing things. Why? Because exactly what you said. They're good operators. And a good operator, and if you're a good operator, it doesn't matter what the other people do. With that said, we are still in the market here. That's the exciting part, where you can be somewhat of an amateur, you can be somewhat of a beginner, you can be a complete beginner for that matter. And if you just follow good advice and good strategies, you get to get deals. And the key to that is to make that phone ring or get those offers in. And you do that through smart direct mail. I'm still a fan of direct mail. And you do that through proper cold calling through a service like you. So let's go back into LandCaller and just a couple of stats. So how many times do you on average call a person before you give up?
Yeah, it's a great question. So I would say if we get to the end of a campaign, which a campaign lasts 4 weeks typically, we've typically called that person anywhere from 2 to 3 dozen times over the course of the month, right? And like I said earlier, we're going to try them on different days of the week, different times of day. We're going to use all those different area codes. So, the frequency with which they get called increases as the month increases, because we pick all the lowest hanging fruit first, right? The people that are most likely to pick up the phone, well, they pick up the phone the first or second time we call them at the beginning of the month. And then as the campaign goes along, you start to see those metrics start to, go down. And then the reason our campaigns last about 4 weeks is right at the end of 4 weeks, if you kind of graphed out the list health of like leads per contact and dials per lead, it kind of drops off a cliff. And that's where you want to switch that list out, bring a new one in. Doesn't mean you could ever call there again. You absolutely can. Like I mentioned earlier, I've been calling the 6 same places in North Carolina for 3 years now. It just means you got to rest it for a little bit and give it some time.
And that's very consistent with what we have done. People always ask us, Jack, you don't send like 7 different touch points. No, we send like one letter or one phone call or one thing. And in this case, you send more than one phone call because they want to get a hold of them, but it's the same kind of thing. And so we send out a letter, or perhaps you do one repeat thing, but you don't bombard them 17 times, because while the overall response rates over time is going to go up, the efficiency goes down. It's like the first letter gets you a 2% response rate. If you then send another letter at the same exact cost to the same people, you might only get another 0.75% response rate. If you then send another letter to the same exact people at the same exact cost, you might only get another 0.5%. So now you spend 3 times the money, but you have just gotten you haven't even doubled your response rate from 3 kind of letters. You probably 1.5% times the response rate. So the better option is send out one set of letters, collect as many as you want, or do what you said, to do a cold calling. Those that don't respond, send them a direct mail
Mhm.
piece, and then let it be after that. Let
Yep.
them rest a little bit, come back 6 months, because 6 months from now they've forgotten about you, and new people are in there, are ready to have that. The time and circumstances have changed. They're
Yes,
ready to let
exactly.
these properties go again. You got almost like a new batch of people ready to now say yes. And boom, you're getting another 2% response rate. You get another nice response rate to the cold calling, and you can keep that on forever. I mean, I've been
Yeah.
doing this for 22 years. There's areas that we have been, we call it
Yeah.
harvesting, that we have been harvesting for 22 years, every single year. And it's, and the response, I mean, the success rate has never really dropped off a cliff, because there's new people every year willing to let their properties go.
Absolutely. The circumstances changing means it's never ending sources of new deals. I mean, I have deals in my CRM right now of people that I sent letters to probably half a dozen times over, the course of a couple of years, and then they picked up the phone. We can actually see in our system, because we call it a disposition. So if I call you, whatever happens on that call, when I get off, it's going to be disposition. So it's either going to be dispositioned as a, hey, this person's not interested, or hey, don't ever call me again, or this is a lead, right? So we have people that have been dispositioned as not interested, not interested this time, not interested this time. We can go back and see, oh yeah, over the last course of the year, they've said not interested 4 times. Now all of a sudden they're in a client CRM as an interested lead, because circumstances change. So that's what I try to get across to people. It's that balance. You want a good return on your caller's time for us, right? Like, your caller could keep calling the same list for months on end and trickling out, a lead here, a lead there. But your better efficiency and better use of their time is to buy new data, or, go pull new data for a new area, and then get them a fresh set of data, because it's about efficiencies, like you were saying earlier. Same thing with mail.
Yeah, very cool. Good. So that's you obviously offer this as a service. Typically, do you have like a minimum time frame that people need to commit to you, or can they test it for like one campaign for like 4 weeks, and then decide if that's something they want to continue or not, or how does that typically work?
Yeah. So actually, the LPG conference that we sponsored in September, that we went to in Denver, that was kind of the impetus for us to kind of change things up a little bit. So since we started, we've had a different model, like I mentioned earlier, with that dedicated cold caller. Now, the reason nobody else does it is because the profit margins are a lot slimmer, because instead of being able to stack 10 clients onto a single caller, I've got one caller for every single client that's with me, right? So because of that, we have a subscription contract model, right? We have a 3-month, a 6-month, and an annual. But after going to that conference and hearing from a lot of people, we realized that there's just a lot of people who can't deal with the amount of lead flow that a full-time caller gets, right? Because you're going to get 70, 75 leads a month. And some people are just not ready for that. Whether maybe their budget's not ready for that, or in most cases, what it actually is, their budget's fine. It's a very, it's a good ROI on service, but they just can't deal with having 70 leads in their CRM. So we actually revamped some things, and we now offer, we call basic packages, which basically it doesn't look the exact same, in the sense you don't have a dedicated caller, but it allows you to get in at a lower price point, and more importantly, at a lower amount of lead flow, to kind of match where you are in your land building business journey. And so we have 2 options. We have our enterprise packages, which is what I described, with a full-time caller and that minimum contract length. There's a 3-month is our minimum. But then if you're just like, well, I want to test this out, I'm just getting started, you can buy these basic packages with a certain amount of calls for, we have different tiers there, but that kind of allows you to get a step in the door, essentially, and test out the service if it works well for you. Cold calling's not for everybody. I tell people, if you're not good, or if somebody on your team is not good talking on the phone, I would not make cold calling your primary method, only because we may do the cold call, you've got to do the follow-up call, and you've got to do the negotiations. So if you're not ready to wheel and deal and stuff, then maybe direct mail blind offers is your better is your better kind of method, at least initially. But yeah, so those are our two different packages, Jack, and you can see those on our website. All of our stuffs, all of our pricing's right there, open for anybody to see. And that we kind of have we're hoping we basically have a level to meet any investor at any stage of where they're at. I mean, we have flippers that have 6 full-time cold callers with us, and we have people that are, at our lowest level. And that's what's cool about it.
Cool. And again, give us the link for people to find you.
Yeah, landcaller.com. And there's a link to the pricing page right at the top. There's FAQs on there. If somebody wants to book a call to talk to us, it'll either be me or one of my associates. You can book a call right there on the website and have a chat with us about any questions that might have about our services. I'm happy to answer them. Wonderful.
Great. So guys, again, cold calling, it is the days are over where you can do direct mail all day long and things like that. It works out fine. But if you really want to scale a business, you want to start going with a multifaceted marketing approach. Cold calling is definitely part of that. Texting could be part of it, although be very, very careful with texting because there's all kinds of rules and things like that. You can be easily sued. So if anything, use a service similar to you guys for texting. But in an ideal world, you want to know it's no longer either or, it's and. So if you want to build a scalable business, make sure you do some cold calling, supplement it with direct mail. And I love the combination of that cold call, those that respond, well, they responded already. They don't need a letter anymore. But those that don't respond, they probably respond to a cold call. And perhaps those that still don't respond very carefully can respond to a text message. But I also love what you said, which is design. Remember, this business is designed to be working for you instead of you working for it. So if you are the complete introvert and you don't ever want to talk to anyone, what you just said, Joe, is really important because you guys do the cold call and generate the lead, but because the lead was generated by a phone call, the cold call also, the seller also expects a follow-up cold call for further discussion. So it means you're kicking off a phone path to the deal. And of course, the actual offer can be made by mail and stuff like that. That's fine, or by DocuSign or by email or whatever it is. But between that call and the actual offer, usually there should be an extra phone call. And if you're the person who's like, I don't want to ever talk to anyone, this might not be for you. But if you're willing to do some calls in the evenings, on the weekends, where it fits in, after they generate the lead for you, then this is the right place. This is the right thing for you.
Absolutely. Couldn't have said it better myself.
All right. So yeah, this is fantastic, guys. So one last question, and that is, so on average, how many people do you need to contact in order to get somebody to say, yeah, to generate a lead, a true lead?
To generate a lead. So let me break down the numbers like this. A campaign that runs for a month is typically about 10 to 12,000 owners that we are reaching out to. That's going to generate, on average, about 75 legitimate leads during that month. And what we see from our clients that report back to us, and obviously there's a big asterisk on this number, right? Because our clients span the gamut of people that are, I've got clients that are happy if they get one deal a month because those deals are 200 to 300K in profit per deal. And I've got other clients that they like to live in the 5 to 20K profit per deal. But on average, I would say 5 to 10% of that 75 leads turn into signed deals, contracts, right? So you're looking at, 2 to 7 or so deals per month from our clients based on that original number of 10 to 12,000 records we called.
Okay. So 10 to 12,000 records that you call turns into 75 leads, turns into 5 to 7 deals. Mm-hmm. All right. So, and again, what does that cost somebody to do that?
So they're all in cost, again, depending on the length of their contract and stuff with us, but all in, including polling the property records, skip tracing, everything, is going to be somewhere from like 27 to 33, 3,500. So, 30-ish cents on the dollar.
That is pretty darn good, because if you look at that, like if that gets you 5 deals, it's an easy number to do math with. Like basically your cost is approximately, let's say $600 an actual deal. $600 a deal is something that you're probably going to have a hard time currently getting done with direct mail. The direct mail numbers are definitely higher than that. They're probably more in the $1,200 to $1,500 range, and higher if you go to higher end properties where you get lower response rates. But obviously, the lower the price range is, the higher the response rates. So it's kind of a relative kind of number. But you're probably going to be in the direct mail world between the $1,200 and the $2,000 per deal. It's still great, because if you're making 15 grand, that's great. Or if you're making 50 grand, it's even better. But it's the same thing over here. Some of these deals are going to make you 5 grand, and some of these deals are going to make you 100 grand. So this is a really good number. But what it does require, of course, is you to have the ability to put that kind of a budget in. And I think that means that probably your best customers are those that are already active in land business. They're already to some degree successful, and they know that they have the standing power and the stamina to put 3 to 6 months of $3,000 a month into something, so that they get the result from it.
Yeah. I agree. We definitely have some offerings out there for newbies, and we actually have LPG students, people that saw our booth at the conference that have signed up, completely new to land, are having success. Like with anything, though, your experience level allows you to maximize whatever you're paying for. So, sure, new people can have success with our service. Experienced people are going to have more success, and that's just, that's just life. But absolutely, it's definitely, land pros make good use of that. If you look at it as ROAS, return on advertising spend, it's really a very competitive rate.
Absolutely, it is. So great. So with that said, guys, thank you very much. Thank you, Joe, for being here on the show with us.
Thanks, Jack.
With me here, with me and my multiple personalities, I like to say. Like when they say like, yeah, we're good. And it's like, well, it's only me here. It's like, I guess it's me and my multiple personalities. So thanks for being here on the show with me. That's a wrap. As always, guys, give us that 5-star review. Give us that forward to your friends. Again, give us the website one more time.
LandCaller.com.
There we go, landcaller.com. I want to make sure I don't butcher it in any shape or form. So landcaller.com, check it out, and we'll see you probably at one of our next conferences. And we'll see you hopefully in the next show. Thank you very much. Bye-bye.